Today we're going to check out the JVC NZ700 native 4K laser projector. And a big thanks to JVC and to Dreamedia for sending this over for me to check out. If you want to grab one, I'll leave links down below in this video's description. What we're going to do first is take a peek at the projector settings. Now, if you are coming from a JVC projector, what you'll notice here is that this has a brand new menu. So all the way at the last option here, we have what is the settings menu select. So the first section here is your picture settings. So a lot of these settings are the same as the older generation, but they just categorized it in a few different pages, in those 3 different pages. So the first one here, we've got your mode settings, we got your picture mode. Right now we're in SDR mode, so the HDR options are going to be a little bit different. So for SDR, we've got natural, cinema, vivid, filmmaker mode, SDR1 and SDR2. For color profile, we got a few different options there. We've got your color temperature options, gamma selection from 2.2 up to custom 3, HDR settings, which is grayed out right now. Your MPC settings, we got a few different options for low, high. So if we click on low, we can adjust the enhance or smoothing options for your image quality. And then for clear motion drive, we've got high, low, and then off. Now this is a little bit different from the higher end models. You do not get the motion interpolation. So if you want to get that smooth 48, 60 frames per second soap opera look, then you're not going to be able to do that with the 700 and I believe also the 500. For me personally, I never used that feature anyways, so it's kind of irrelevant for my usage. The next section here is your picture adjust. Again, you can choose whatever preset you want to use and then go down here, and then whatever settings you change here will automatically stick to that specific preset. So for laser power, I got it at 0, which is essentially about 50%. You can go all the way up to 100. And as you can see, it about doubles in brightness if we go ahead and max this all out. But I'm going to go ahead and keep this at 0 so I don't blow out the camera. For dynamic control, this is the laser dimming function. We've got off, balanced, high, and then low. We'll come back, take a look at that later. Aperture, right now I've got it fully open, or you can stop it down. And as you can see, it does get darker. And then we have sliders for contrast, brightness, color, and tint. Next section here is your color profile. We get a few different options there. And then the next section here is your color management. Full disclaimer, I am not a professional calibrator, so I do not have the appropriate tools to calibrate the projector. But if you are, you can use the color management system here to do that. And again, here we have the color temp area. So if you do have the appropriate tools, you can calibrate your color temperature. Next section is gamma. We get a few different options there from 2.2 up to a custom 3. You can also adjust the color selection, either white, red, green, or blue. And then you can change the picture tone, dark level, and then brightness level. And then here we have the input information. This will give you everything that's feeding into the projector and tell you exactly what it's displaying to you. Under information, I am on version 1.02 firmware. And then for light source, there is 218 hours on this particular projector. Let's hop on over to the HDMI settings. Here we've got the input level. To keep the guesswork out of it, I'm just going to keep it on auto. Color space, I'm also keeping this on auto as well. Auto pick mode select. So from here for SDR content, if you're watching SDR material, you can select whatever this defaults to for SDR material. Same thing for HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and then for filmmaker mode, you can switch between auto and manual. And you can do that for either HDMI 1 or HDMI 2. Next section is content type. We've got auto, SDR, HDR10 Plus, HDR10, and then HLG. And then HDMI format setting, we've got standard, option 1, or option 2. And then the last section here is the installation settings. Here we can load settings, save settings, or name settings. And then for lens control, we've got your focus, we've got zoom, which is fairly responsive. It's not the quickest zoom I've ever used on a projector, but it's about on par as what was on the previous generation NZ series. And then here we have shift, which you can move horizontal or vertically. It's got really good granular control, so you can definitely get this lined up exactly to your screen. You can turn the image pattern on or off. You can lock settings, and then you can reset the lens back to center. Next section here is pixel adjust. You can choose what area. You can select whole area or different zones. You can select which color you want to adjust. We've got red or blue. You can adjust pattern on or off. For adjust pattern color, we've got white or yellow and cyan. You can adjust per pixel or very fine adjustment. And here on the bottom right hand corner, there are specific buttons on the remote control which let you select how fine of an adjustment that you want to make. So if you're noticing any kind of red or blue fringing, just go per section and you can really fine tune this to get a really razor sharp, crisp image. And then the last option is reset. We've got masking option, anamorphic. So if you have an anamorphic lens, there are different stretch levels here. And for the screen setting, you can look up your screen on JVC's site and input the code here, as well as the aspect ratio if your screen is supported. This is supposed to match the projector's color balance with your specific screen. For installation style, we've got front ceiling mount, rear, and then rear ceiling mount. There is keystone correction. So right now this is at a -7, or we can go up to a +7. Obviously, you want to get this as square as possible with your screen and avoid using keystone correction. And then for different aspect ratio, we've got zoom, auto, and then native. Next section is your network settings, your display settings, your eco settings. There is a timer that you can select between 1 hour up to 4 hours. You can turn eco mode on or off, then hide mode, which will black out the screen. You can turn that on or off. And then the last settings here is your remote control code, high altitude on or off, which will ramp up the fan. You can back up your settings, factory reset, or if there is a firmware update, you can go into here, insert the USB stick, and then make your firmware update. Now, if you are watching HDR material, you do get a few different options here. We've got Frame Adapt HDR1, Frame Adapt HDR2, Filmmaker Mode HDR1, and then HDR2. So this is different from the standard SDR picture presets. For color profile, we've got BT2020 wide or BT2020 normal. If you select wide, that will engage the color filter. For color temp, we've got a few different options there. And then for HDR settings, for HDR processing, you can choose between static, frame by frame, or scene by scene. I do think most folks are probably going to use frame by frame. And then for HDR quantizer, if you select auto normal, this will try to automatically optimize the HDR for brightness and shadows. We'll come back and take a look at that later. And then for deep black, we've got on or off. This is very subtle, but this will help bring out a little bit more detail in the black areas. You can see a slight change. It's not drastic, but it does help out for sure. And that is it for the settings. Now, I am projecting on a 150-inch Maestro 2 acoustically transparent screen from Screen Innovations with a gain of 1.1, and the projector is about 20 feet away from the screen. This is a little bit smaller than the older NZ8. It measures 17 3/4 inches wide by 7 1/4 inches in height by 18 inches deep, and it weighs 32.6 pounds, which makes it, at the time of this video, the smallest native 4K projector. It's got a rated spec of 2300 lumens with an 80,000 to 1 native contrast. There's an 80mm motorized lens up front with vertical and horizontal shift, flanked by intake vents. Around the back are the exhaust vents, 2 HDMI 2.1 inputs at 32 gigabits per second with 4K 60 support, a LAN and USB inputs, power button, and IR sensor. Now, this is a laser projector with laser life expectancy of up to 20,000 hours. Next thing I wanted to do is see if there was a big difference with my older NZ8. And I'll tell you what, if I didn't have these in the same room at the same time, and you switched the NZ8 and replaced it with the NZ700, I probably wouldn't have even noticed. However, I would have noticed that the 700 is quieter in max laser brightness over the NZ8. And for that reason, I always had a hard time maxing out the NZ8's laser. Now, what we're looking at here is the Lion King on max brightness with the same settings on both projectors in 4K. The NZ8 was a little brighter in person, and the clouds on the NZ8 also looked to have a bit more definition. Zooming in close without 8K E-shift turned on, the 700 looks to me to be a touch sharper, but when I turned on the 8K E-shift on the NZ8, now this looks to be a little bit sharper over the NZ700. Now I didn't have both of these projectors for long at the same time, but my main takeaways is that I didn't miss having the 8K upscaling. I suppose if I had a bigger screen it might be more useful. The little bit of extra brightness did make a difference with the NZ8, so I did miss that. But I would trade that little bit of brightness for the quieter NZ700. If the projectors were in a separate room where the projector's fan noise didn't make a difference, then yes, I would probably stick with the NZ8. Other than that, I haven't missed out not using the NZ8 in my setup. Next up is the color filter. With the filter in place, it is spec'd at 98% P3 coverage, but it can cut down on light output by about 25% or so. Now with the filter in place, I think the colors do look a touch better, so you'll have to decide whether you want better color accuracy over a brighter picture. For the rest of this video, I am going to keep the filter in place. Next is the horses from the Spears and Munsell disc. Except for the horses in the 4000 nit demo looking slightly more raised, all four scenes look relatively the same, so the tone mapping is doing a great job, as to be expected. Next, I put the 700 in filmmaker mode and tested out the dynamic control so we can see how well the laser dimming worked. I did overexpose the image a bit to make it easier to see the changes, so if you're noticing that the whites are clipped, just know that it is overexposed. I think it's noticeable that with the dynamic control turned off, the entire screen is just really dark gray. While on high, with every fade, the laser completely shuts off for that perfect fade to black. And then the balanced and low settings is gonna fall in between with how aggressive they will react to changes. Next is the frame adapt 1 versus frame adapt 2. The blacks are probably gonna look crushed, but I wanted to maintain as much highlight detail as possible for this shot. We can see that there are more clouds very clearly in the adapt 1 shot, but there is more shadow detail in adapt 2, and this is a scene from Pacific Rim. There's also a bit more shadow detail in this scene from Batman v Superman. I should also mention that I do have the HDR quantizer set to 0, which takes us next to the HDR quantizer option. There's a few different settings here. You can choose Auto Normal, which will try to give you a balance in brightness in both shadow and highlight detail without crushing or clipping too much. Or you can manually adjust it yourself from a -2 to a +2. There's also an Auto Wide mode, which will emphasize a brighter picture at the expense of clipping highlights. So if you notice that your image is too dark, then adjusting the quantizer option might be the fix. Now here's a scene from the movie Nope on 4K Blu-ray. I set it up so you can see how well the quantizer and the two different frame adapt options work together. As you can see on both wide modes, it'll blow out the sunlight that's right behind the clouds, but you do get better information in the darker areas. So this might be something that you'll have to change on a movie-by-movie basis, and a kind of a season-to-taste kind of feature. Now unfortunately, to hit this lower price point, JVC did have to remove the 3D function on the 5 and 700 models. So if you want 3D, you'll have to move up to the NZ800 and 900 projectors, which do cost significantly more. But if you don't need 3D or the extra brightness or more gaming features along with 8K upscaling, I think the NZ700 is a serious projector for the money. And the fact that this is a native 4K projector that doesn't rely on pixel shifting or suffers from DLP rainbows is a major win for the 700. I do feel for a 150-inch screen, the 700 is kind of pushing it for overall brightness and HDR impact. Not that it's an unwatchably dim image, but coming from brighter projectors like the Epson QB1000 and the Sony Projector 8, it's kind of hard to go backwards for brightness. Overall, going from the NZ8 to the NZ700, I really didn't feel like I was missing anything. I do have a bit of FOMO not having the 8K E-shift feature, but honestly, I never used it, and I could care less about gaming on a projector. Although giving up 3D is kind of a deal breaker since I do have a ton of 3D movies, so an NZ800 might be in my future. Now if you do want to grab one of these projectors, you can grab one at our channel partner Dreamedia. Give them a call and let them know that I sent you. Well anyways guys, thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you again in the next video.